Hey guys, welcome to yet another Splatoon guide with yours truly, Samba. And today, I'm bringing you something different. Inspired by the apparent unanimous hate people have for the solo queue Clan Blitz experience, which I believe is due to the lack of knowledge so many players have when going into this mode, I thought it would be helpful to bring our community a compilation of relevant tips, strategies, and hidden mechanics of this mode that I'm sure many of you might not know about and that are essential if you want to get to higher ranks and if you want to perform well if you're already there. Now, in order to make it so that everyone who watches this video can get the most out of it, I've decided to divide each tip, strategy, or hidden mechanic into ranks, which I want to make it clear that it doesn't mean that you need to be at that rank in order to be able to make use of that tip. Instead, this was just my way of trying not to recommend stuff that might be too complicated for players in lower ranks. But I do recommend that you check out every tip in here, because once you know it, then you already have it in your arsenal. Just for convenience, you can find the timestamps for each section in the description down below. And before we start, I want to say that I know that we will start with stuff that should be pretty basic for people who have been playing the game for a while, but as far as I know, you really can't find none of this information I'm bringing here in the game itself. So I'm hoping that there will be at least something that you'll find out with this video that you didn't know about until then, and that will eventually change your game and help you become a better player. C rank. Alright, so starting with C rank, if you are at C-, the first thing you absolutely must know is that 10 individual clans are worth more than a power clan. And that's it, simple math. But most people don't notice it until they're told about it. So, each individual clan is worth 3 points. So if you throw in 9 of them, you'll be scoring 27 points in total, while a power clan composed of 10 clans is worth only 20 points. Or, in other words, if you make a power clan, you're collecting 1 extra clan, but you're scoring 7 points less than you would. Or even 10 points if you count that 10th extra clan. So, while it's true that throwing a single power clan into the basket is a lot quicker and therefore a lot safer than throwing 9 individual clans, sometimes if your team has enough control for that, it can be safer for you to approach the basket without having that glowing target of the power clan on your back. And if you do manage to score anything above 6 clans, it will already have been worth it, as you'll have scored more than what you would have with a power clan. Now, moving on to C rank, you must know that you can throw normal clans further than power clans. This is a basic, hidden mechanic that might not be life-changing at C rank, as I don't think you should be having that much trouble trying to score here, but this is an information that will be life-saving from here on, so you might as well start practicing it. So, we've discussed how power clans and normal clans have different worth, but you also need to know that they also have different weight, in a sense, which affects the distance they can travel in the air and where you can throw them from. For power clans, you can easily measure the distance that you can safely score them from by standing on that little podium that is present in front of every basket, as anything further than that won't be able to reach the basket. But as for normal clans, they travel a slightly longer distance in the air, so you can throw them slightly further than that and still manage to score. And the reason why that is so important is because many maps in Splatoon were intentionally designed in a way that in order to be able to break the enemy team's barrier or to be able to simply score a power clan when the basket is already open due to the high, quick reward the power clans represents, you absolutely must get closer to the basket in a way that you simply can't stay in a safe position, and you have to put yourself in a position where you can be easily killed while trying to score. But with ordinary clans, that's not the case, and there are many maps that allow you to keep scoring from a much safer position, which creates a much bigger problem for the enemy team that needs to stop you. And moving on to our last stop in C rank, for C+, I'll give you a tip that I wish more of my X rank teammates knew of, cause you must know that you can and should pass clams to a teammate. Now, this is a tip that I promise you in every rank up to X rank, you'll want to recommend this video to every teammate you get, just so they can finally start doing this properly. Okay, so the game taught you that to throw clams into the basket, all you've got to do is press A, right? But what the game doesn't tell you is that you can actually throw clams wherever you like by pressing A. So that means that if you want to, you can throw clams on the floor right next to your teammate so they can grab those clams to form a power clam. Or instead, you can even throw those clams directly at your teammate so they can finally stop spamming this way. And this information is especially relevant for those moments when you're finally under the enemy team's basket and you and your teammate have a bunch of clams each, but none of you have a power clam to break the barrier. So, instead of going back looking for more clams, giving the enemy team extra time to respawn, you can simply throw your clams directly at your teammate to form a power clam. And you can check exactly how many they need by the number that's above their head. If you're aware of this information and you're paying attention to how many clams you and your teammates have, which you can also check on the HUD on the top of the screen, you don't have to keep waiting until someone forms a power clam to decide to start a push, because you'll know that once you get there, you'll have enough clams to form a power clam and start scoring. And as a bonus tip, since we're talking about passing clams to a teammate, it's important to know that if you see a teammate hiding in ink in the middle of the map while holding exactly 9 clams, if you believe it's a good idea to form a power clam at that moment, instead of throwing the missing clam directly at your teammate, it's always best to throw it on the floor next to them, because sometimes your teammate will have other plans and they might be waiting for the appropriate moment to form a power clam. So if you throw that last clam directly at them, you'll only be exposing their position and calling a lot of unwanted attention to them, which is exactly what they were trying to avoid. And also, you can pass power clams to your teammates. That works as well. B rank. Now moving on to B rank, starting with B-, you must know that you can super jump while holding a power clam. Now, while I'm sure that this might seem pretty obvious to the people who found out about it by themselves, I can guarantee you that there will be a lot of people who will find out about it with this video. So, you might already know that if you press X to review your map, you can choose one of the directions on your D-pad to choose one of your teammates' location so you can jump to the spot they're standing at that moment. But what a lot of people don't know is that you can also jump to a teammate while holding a power clam, which is especially useful when you've got a teammate right under the basket and your team needs to start scoring, but you're the one holding the power clam and you're not anywhere near the basket. Or you can also jump to a teammate when your team has already managed to break the opposing team's basket, and you can jump in while holding a power clam just to get those extra 20 points on the board. Now, just be careful, because if you jump back to your spawn while holding a power clam, or while holding any amount of clams for that matter, that power clam will break and you will lose all those clams. Now onto B rank, you must know that you can juggle one extra clam to form a power clam near the basket. So, piling up on that tip about being aware of when's the best moment to form a power clam, here is a more challenging mechanic. If you're holding 9 clams on you and you notice that you might be able to sneak past your enemies to score, maybe on a flank, you can throw one clam ahead of you and then pick one more clam on your way, which will bring you back to 9 clams, but with one extra clam ahead of you. So you can keep doing that up until the moment when you're near the enemy team's basket, where you can finally pick up that last clan and form a power clan to start scoring. Now, that's a strategy that's not exactly common or recommended in higher ranks, as in higher ranks players will spot you a lot more frequently, and in higher ranks you're expected to be able to build a more solid push together with your team instead of sneaking in by yourself. But sometimes there will be matches where your team simply won't be able to break through the enemy team's defenses, and having someone not only flank but start a push by breaking the basket might be enough to finally get your push going and maybe get your teammates to jump to you instead of repeatedly calling this way from under the basket while holding 9 clans just to have no one jump to you. Now moving on to B+, you absolutely must know the baller strategy. So now that you already know that you can jump to teammates while holding a power clan, now you should know that when you jump to a teammate while holding a power clan, most of the time if you spam press A, there's a moment when you can throw your power clan into the basket before anyone is able to kill you. And that is the premise that has given birth to a strategy that is true. It's a bit outdated nowadays, but that still is a relevant strategy that everyone must know of, especially when your team or the enemy team has more than one power clan to score, and that is the baller strategy. So, if a player on your team has the baller special, that person can use the shield that their special gives them just to break through the enemy team's defenses and provide a jump to their teammates, who can then jump to that position and score their power clan. I won't go into detail into why this isn't considered a good strategy anymore, just not to make this video longer, but if you're curious, we can always continue that discussion in the comments, but still, it's important that you know about it so at least you can recognize it and you can be prepared to counter it when people use it on your team, or so you have that option as well when needed. And as a bonus tip, if a player is holding a power clan and they use baller themselves in order to get closer to your basket, you absolutely shouldn't pop their baller, or else you'll just be making them a favor, as when they get popped by an enemy, they're able to instantly throw the power clan, whereas if they pop the baller themselves, they'll drop the power clan for a moment, giving you a chance to kill them and stop them from scoring. A rank. Now onto A rank, starting off with a more complex tip to A-, you must know that your team needs to have a power clan in order to force overtime. So this is another tip that can be dividing, because I'm sure that a lot of people find this really obvious, and still, even in X rank, I see a lot of people not paying attention enough to this game mechanic. Alright, so everyone knows that when the timer hits 0 in a match, the game can give you a last chance to get the lead back if your team is losing, and that's pretty much what overtime is. But what a lot of people don't know is that there is a requirement for that to happen, and that requirement is that the team that is losing needs to have a power clan formed before the timer hits 0. So that means that if you've got 9 clans on you and you're getting to that last clan just at the moment when the timer hits 0, it won't matter, the game's over. So you need that power clan formed before the timer hits 0. Another common misconception is that you need to be holding that power clan to force overtime, but actually you don't. Even the pity clan counts. That power clan that the game gives you after the enemy team has scored on your basket and it closes, and as long as that power clan is still in the game under your basket, the match will go into overtime. And as an extra tip, it's important to know that overtime will last only as long as you still have that power clan in the game. So if someone picks it up and dies while holding it and no one picks it up before it breaks, overtime will end and your team will lose. But as long as your team has a power climb, overtime will last 20 seconds or until the moment when the enemy team's basket closes again after being broken. So be careful when deciding to pick it up, but also be careful not to take too long as well. And moving on to A rank, you must know that you can use bubbles as a shield to score. And now, on to the successor of the baller strategy, we come to the bubble strategy. Something that is really common in lower ranks is that a player will use bubbles when close to the enemy team's basket, and then one of their teammates will immediately pop it, hoping to get a kill. If you're someone who does that, please stop doing it right now. Bubbles are extremely popular in clamblets because they're not only a huge menace to anyone that's near them, but they're also a very effective shield that you can use to get closer to the enemy team's basket, and that you can also hide within to keep scoring from there. And if an enemy tries to shoot you, they'll have to wear the bubbles down first in order to be able to finally get to you. Very simple strategy, and yet extremely popular in professional play. Now on to A+, you absolutely must know that you shouldn't be playing defense while holding clans. This might seem like pretty basic information due to how easy it is to perform this mechanically, but I held on to this information up until a rank where I believe players already should have their mechanics down to a level where they don't have to dedicate too much attention to the mechanics of the game anymore, and now they can finally start thinking about the more complex strategy-based side of things. Now, you probably already know that when you die, you can drop up to 4 clans maximum, but as we'll see later on this list, having even 1 clan on you while playing defense can be enough to jeopardize your team's victory. I mean, sure, it would be good already having something to start off a counter push after successfully defending your basket. And yes, I understand the desperation of wanting to get back to your basket as soon as possible and not losing any time throwing clams away. But that's something that any player at a higher level will pay attention to in order not to make their opponent's lives easier. Because if you're defending against the enemy team's push, there's always a chance you might die while doing so. In the same way you wouldn't go around fetching more clams for your opponents to score, you don't want to risk dying and leaving clams behind for them to score on your team. So if you're playing defense, you can even form a power clan, because if you die, your opponents won't be able to use that to score against your team. Or you can throw your clans off the map, or if you're too far away from your basket, you can even jump back to your spawn, breaking all your clans in the process. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that you don't leave clans behind, facilitating your team's defeat. S rank. Now, moving on to S rank, you must know that actively holding a power climb helps charge your team specials faster. So, the way this works is that whenever anyone on your team is holding a power climb, the game gives your entire team a boost on their special counter of 3 points per second, simply for holding it. So for a special that takes 210 points to be charged, you'll be progressing 3 extra points per second, other than the points you get for painting. It is not much, but it's significant enough for you to finally have a reason to consider holding a power clan and having that target on your back, as you'll know that by doing so, you'll be helping your whole team. But know, however, that this boost only happens if the enemy team isn't holding a power climb too, because if they are, both effects cancel each other and no one gets the boost. Unless, that is, if your team is losing, because the game benefits the losing team by keeping the boost for that team, even if the winning team is holding a power climb too, while it cancels the boost for the winning team. So that's another reason to consider picking up a power climb if the enemy team is holding one, because this way you're canceling the enemy team's special boost while giving your team the boost instead. S+. Okay, so for S+, I'm not giving a tip for every level of it, as I can give you a single tip that will take you through all those ranks and even to higher X if you manage to get on a team that knows this too. As you must know that a push is only a good push if your team is able to keep scoring after breaking the basket, or else it's a bad push. Now, this tip right here is the #1 enemy of Brush players. Sorry guys, I've got nothing against you, but being Lightning McQueen and breaking the enemy team's basket within the first 10 seconds of the match isn't really that helpful. So, this tip is not specifically aimed at lower ranked players, as even in X rank people do this a lot, but in my opinion, this is definitely something that you should already know when you make the transition from S+ to X rank, and that's the reason why I'm mentioning it here. In lower ranks, people tend to think that as long as your team is breaking the enemy team's basket, it should be a good thing. And that can be true, of course, when the enemy team isn't capable of doing anything with the pity climb you just gave them, and if your whole team rushing in to try and score and suiciding on the way there isn't that big of a problem. But in X rank, when you do that against a good team, a team that knows what they're doing, that's a match that will be most probably lost in the first 30 seconds of the match, after the first counter push the enemy team does. And that's cause in the first place, you never want to give your enemies a power climb for free, on top of the power climb that they most probably were building on the meantime. But most importantly, a push is only a good push when your whole team is pushing with you and everyone's bringing clans to score, so your team can invest all of their resources, all of their specials into that push and come out of that situation with a lead that is actually going to be a challenge for the enemy team to take back, instead of a lead that only takes a power climb and a single climb to get back. Again, just for the sake of not making this video even longer, I'll ask you guys to continue this discussion in the comments if you need to be further convinced of why that's the case. But trust me, if your team is sacrificing themselves to score a power climb and a single climb more, you're doing it wrong. X rank. Okay, now you might be asking yourself, what is it that I can teach X rank players that they won't already know about? So first, I'm dividing X rank into 3. Lower X, players under 2300 XP. You must know that you can and should keep your push alive by holding on to at least one last climb to throw in the last second. I'm not here to reinvent the wheel, it's that simple. After you break the basket, a timer starts to count, and you've got up until that timer runs out to keep scoring. But every time you throw in clans, that timer refreshes and goes up by 3 seconds per clan. So, supposing you did everything right, you're not pushing by yourself, you've collected some clans on your way to the basket, you've got your whole team with you, you're scoring, you still have control, your team is killing the whole enemy team over and over again, but then you run out of clans. Someone dies to a bomb by accident, someone else loses their 1v1, someone dies to a special, the basket closes, and the only person alive is the one who had went after more clans to score and came back to this mess of a situation. Now, I understand that not always you have that good of a push. I understand the desperation of wanting to throw in all 9 of your clans all at once, instead of dying while still holding clams. But sometimes, not always, if you hold on to at least a couple of clams while still focusing on keeping control and keeping enemies backed up, that can be what's going to give your teammates time enough to go and collect more clams and still find the basket open to keep scoring when they're back. All you've got to do is to think of your clams as a resource in your push, and you can't run out of resources if you want to have a longer, better push. So if you hold on to at least a couple of clams and throw them in right when the timer is about to run out, you'll be keeping your push alive that much longer, which might be exactly how long your teammates need to get back and score more clams. Now, mid-X players from 2300 to 2500 XP. You absolutely must know that the pity clam is one extra player for your team, so don't touch it. Now, do you know that feeling when you were in the middle of a push, perhaps closing into the enemy team's basket, you had the clans, you had the specials, and then out of a sudden, someone on the enemy team forms a power clan all the way behind your back and scores on your basket instead, making your whole team have to back up, maybe even after you've already invested your specials into that now invalidated push? That's what can happen at any moment's notice while the enemy team has a pity clan under their basket. It's not as menacing, but it's a constant threat that you need to keep track of, as you never know when someone will sneak in a jump while you were distracted with other things. For that reason, one of the biggest mistakes people in X-Rank do is immediately picking up that pity clan when there's absolute no need to pick it up, and worse, picking it up just to die in mid while holding it, and there goes our constant menace. Instead, if you want to start a push, you can simply collect clans on your way to the enemy team's basket as you would normally do if you didn't have the pity clan, as you build map control on the way, gaining turf control, charging specials, and getting pigs, all as you should. And then, if someone on your team dies mid-push while your team is still scoring, that person can get back on the game, and then and only then they can pick up that pity clan and jump in to score a free 20 points for your team, risk-free, or else it should stay there. And finally, higher X players, 2500 XP or higher. You must know that you can manipulate when and where clams will spawn or negate clam spawn. Okay people, we've finally got to the 200 IQ plays right here. So, if you ever find yourself by chance on an all-crown players lobby, or if you're simply that good and you see players on your team picking up exactly 3 clams and leaving the last one of the bunch in its place, you should know that they're doing that for a reason. I'll leave the full article explaining this mechanic in the description down below for the people who want to understand it at a deeper level, but I'll give you the gist of it. So, clams spawn on the map always at the same specific locations and always on a bunch of 4. In order for these clams to respawn after you pick them up, you or someone else must have picked up all 4 of those clams, or else those clams that spawn on that specific location will get blocked and won't respawn until someone finally picks up the remaining clam. Okay, so far simple enough, right? It gets more complex though, because these spots where clams spawn are in fact mirrored on the map, which means that those 4 clams that spawn on that specific spot on your side of the map also spawn on the same exact specific location on the enemy side of the map. And those 2 apparently separate spots are in reality connected to each other, which means that in order for clans to be able to respawn in both of these locations, you actually need to have collected as well all of the clans on their twin spot at the other side of the map. So ultimately, what that means is that if your team is currently on a defensive position and you don't want the enemy team to have access to clans, you can simply just pick up only 3 clans out of a bunch of 4, and that way you'll be effectively blocking clans respawn on that spot's twin, or even at that specific spot on your side if the enemy team gets there, as they'll only find 1 clan there and no more than that. And then when your team is finally ready to push and you finally need as many clans as you can get your hands on, you can finally unblock that spot and allow clans to spawn both on your side and on the enemy team's side while you're pushing in. As I said, it can be a bit complicated the first time you hear this, so I'll leave a stream Dr. Prodigy did as well explaining this mechanic. But all you've got to know is that even though I think that's something you probably won't find in Western lobbies, that's something that absolutely is used in Japanese lobbies, where you can actually have 8 crown players all at once in a single match, and that's something that they really pay attention to. So that's it, guys. This was the ultimate Clan Blitz secret. If you guys enjoyed this video and if you've actually learned something new, please share this video with other people, and please leave your like on this video just so YouTube can recommend it to more people as well, and so I know you've liked it too. If you appreciate this kind of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future updates. Thank you again for having dropped by, and I'll see you soon on our next video.